Game of Mortgages, step 13, we've received the appraisal. So check this out. Here's the one thing that most people do a little too soon in this step is we get the appraisal back and maybe the lender tells you it's at value and we kind of celebrate a little too soon. Here's why. Just because the appraiser has said the appraisal's back and we have it in our hands and it says that it's at value, the lender still has to review the appraisal. Now, some lenders have what's called an overlay. They may say, hey, Mr. Appraiser, you're too aggressive here, you're too conservative here, and we need to adjust these 3 or 4 things. Or maybe the appraiser made some material mistakes that haven't been reviewed. So when you have the appraisal back, that's a huge milestone, but just make sure that you don't release your appraisal contingency too soon. You want to make sure that the appraisal's been received and reviewed by the underwriter and then signed off and approved so that we can move forward in the transaction with no risk. Some of the things that we might see in an appraisal that become an issue, one of those things would be subject to. So subject to is that the appraiser has completed the appraisal, but it's subject to some things. Maybe it's a health and safety issue like a broken window because you could cut yourself, or the firewall door's been breached because someone put a doggy door in there. Sometimes it's minor stuff. You need a light switch. Other times it can be big things like we're worried about the roof or the foundation. If the appraiser is calling something out like we need to get a further inspection of the foundation, that is a major item that needs to be corrected before close. We cannot close saying, hey, we'll just fix that later when it's a big thing like the foundation. Some stuff can be small and we can do escrow holdbacks, or the seller can fix that stuff before close. So just make sure that you have communication with the lender after you've received the appraisal to ensure that it's been signed off and there aren't any of these big things that we still need to work on or fix. So what happens if the property doesn't appraise for value? Remember, the appraisal is the appraiser's opinion of value. Now, they could be right, or we might think that they're wrong. If we think that they're wrong, we can do what's called a rebuttal. We got to provide other comparable sales, properties that are like your home, similar to your home in size, square footage, area, location, and amenities, and get those back to the appraiser with a report why we think they're wrong in the value, and here's the data to potentially support our position. That can take up to a week. They may not agree, they may agree, but just because it comes in low doesn't mean we don't have that option. But if we do decide to go forward with the rebuttal and the appraiser decides not to use our new suggested value, and they stick with the value that we're using, then we have to move on with some other options. One of those options may or may not be you coming in with the difference, depending on what you've done. If you're doing the least amount down, meaning you're doing a program with just 100% financing, or you're doing like a 3% down conventional or a 3.5% down FHA, that's a minimum down program. You're putting the minimum down that the program allows. If the property comes in low, we're gonna have to make up the direct difference of the delta between the appraised value and the contract price. So for example, you have a $300,000 contract and it appraises for $290,000. If you're doing minimum down, you may have to come up with that $10,000 difference plus your down payment. So it's a big deal if it comes in low. The first thing we always try to do is go to the seller and see if they'll come down to our value. But if they don't, and you don't have the difference, and the appraiser doesn't adjust their value, the only other option that we have is to potentially cancel the transaction. So going all the way back to the beginning, that's why it's super important to not jump the gun and release your contingencies until the appraisal is signed off and the lender says, like, you're good, we're good with the appraisal, it's been reviewed, everything's signed off, let's move on to the next step. Now, the next step in Game of Mortgages is to provide the underwriter with all the conditions and kind of get everything patched back together. We're going to go through a few things to make this process quicker in the next video. I look forward to seeing you there.